morning to you, wherever you are, because it is
Morning Somewhere!
for February 25th, 2025. My name is Bernie Burns. I'd hold that one for a second. Sitting right over there, she's being extraordinarily patient with my technology issues today.
Look, I'm just sitting over here hoping that you're not contagious.
Good Lord. I have a theory, Ashley. I have a theory. And I know it happens, so I have a theory, though, that the forces work against me is what it is. This is my conspiracy theory. What happens is I use a lot of different services. I have my soundboard here. I have my online iCloud backup. I've got my drive that I use to transfer stuff, my online cloud drive that I use. Everything seems to expire at the exact same time. And I know that your credentials do expire, but because I use my stuff every single day, I feel like I've lined them all up to where they all expire at the same time. And then I'm just like, every 45, 60 days, I'm treading water. I'm fighting for my life.
And it's cascading, right? Because something will be like, this is expired. And so as a result, this other thing's not working.
Yep.
And if that's not working, this definitely isn't working. And you have to go through and untangle your entire tech life once every 2 months.
Oh, and the same thing. Even I had to re-enter my credit card and everything today. I was just following this thing down a rabbit hole.
I imagine that this is the kind of thing that happens as well, especially if you've gone through and done a fresh setup on something where you already have a number of accounts or whatever, but you go through and you are setting up something fresh, and so you're logging into everything sort of at the same time, and they're all therefore going to expire and make you log in again sort of at the same time. And so your whole life falls apart at once.
One of the cool things about SSDs, and now they have the M2 drives, is they tend to be smaller than the disk drives we had back in the day, the platter drives. So I don't ever use my boot drive for anything really except for the operating system. I am now no longer concerned about just wiping something, just wipe it out and then restore it, because I know I have all my data, and just a couple of passwords later, I'm done with everything. In the past, whenever I would wipe a hard drive, it's oh shit, I just lost 6 months of something because I forgot to back it up.
Right. Or have you gone through and backed up your photos? And what about your My Documents? Do you need to copy your downloads folder do you need to burn it onto a CD so you can restore all this stuff with your new install? Those days are gone.
Even save games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Favorites in your favorites bar on your web browser. You're oh shit, I forgot. I didn't even know where those are stored. And those are all gone forever. Now it's just goes to the internet and goes, oh, we collect all this shit on you anyway.
It is amazing. When you got me this new laptop, I went and logged in and just boom, there's all my stuff.
Yeah.
And it's I need to install Steam, and then I've got everything on all my games and all my saves, and everything's great. Everything's almost exactly as I left it, just in a lovely new package.
And while we're talking about all these technical issues, there's been this big story in the news that developed late last week and was big over the weekend, which is the exchange Bybit, which is a cryptocurrency exchange. They have had a $1.5 billion heist of their Ethereum reserves.
The heisty types are back. Guess what? Spoiler alert. They use the stolen pigeons.
Yeah, they're back, and they're bigger than ever. And the stolen pigeons somehow made off with $1.5 billion. And so it's been a big story. And the big story about this one is everyone trying to figure out how they pulled it off, because all fingers right now are pointing towards this group called Lazarus, which is based out of North Korea. I won't pretend to know anything about them whatsoever, but everything I've read about them says that they use a lot of social engineering and malware attacks to basically hyper-focus on a group, infiltrate the group, and then get access to their wallets. Usually with an exchange, it means a hot wallet or something where the reserves are stored online, where all the cryptocurrency is. This is a really weird one because they somehow got access to a cold wallet offline, and then they got access to something that's even a layer of security deeper, which is a multi-signature cold wallet. That must mean they infiltrated multiple people within the company, and they're trying to figure out how this happened. The scary thing that people are putting out there is there something fundamentally wrong with Ethereum? Personally, I think what'll happen when they figure this all out is it's just the age-old tale of, somebody just got fooled and installed something on their computer they shouldn't have. They got enough of those people and they got access to these things.
Well, what I find interesting about this is, so you say it's Ethereum. So this is like people took Ethereum, and that's currently worth $1.5 billion. But does that mean that as well the value of the thing could go up or down based on like the value of Ethereum? So it could be worth like a $1.7 billion heist tomorrow.
Well, I don't think after the heist it's going to go up.
Well,
right?
you never know. It's like think about this, right? Right now, Ethereum is that guy who's gone to the bar and he's got his wedding ring on. For the first time, and suddenly like all the girls around him are like giving him attention that he never got before. They're like, oh, someone married you, and what they're thinking, right, is they're like someone put in the work and decided that this was a worthy investment.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no. I like the way you're thinking about it, because like a lot of people are going to read the headline and they're going to read. I mean, most people probably don't even know what Ethereum is. For a long time, it was kind of held up. I'd say for a long time, this is going to be a very contentious statement, that it was like number 2 to Bitcoin. That number 2 spot is very contentious, but Ethereum has really held that spot for a really long time.
Well, it's been very consistent and fairly stable, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's how a lot of people think about it.
No red flags, loads the dishwasher.
But most people don't know about it. I mean, most people know about the offshoots of it, like some DeFi stuff, and really like NFTs came out of, smart contracts for Ethereum. But they're going to read the headline and they're going to read Ethereum and then $1.5 billion. And probably what they're going to take away from that, is Ethereum's worth a lot of money, right?
It's worth at least $1.5 billion.
That's an interesting way. Yeah, but that's, I can absolutely see people thinking that way. But so they're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how this happened, how they were able to pull this off. And, don't want to get too far ahead of the curve here talking about it. But my personal gut feeling is you're going to find out, somebody just installed something they shouldn't have installed.
Well, look, this is a weird thing, too, because this Bybit, I guess, is an exchange. I had never really heard about it before, literally this week. So I just went and looked it up. And according to a quick search, Bybit is a cryptocurrency exchange. It was founded in Singapore in 2018. It's currently headquartered in Dubai and registered in the British Virgin Islands.
Oh, well, go figure. British Virgin Islands.
So it does, it says it's unregulated, available to residents of most countries outside the United States. So one of the reasons that we may not have heard about it is they won't allow people in the U.S. to use their exchange.
The U.S. won't allow it.
I think the company won't allow it because they don't want to deal with the sort of state-by-state regulations for how cryptocurrency is handled in the U.S. So they just say straight up, no Americans. Thank you.
The British Virgin Islands is a lovely part of the world, but too often you hear about it associated with really shady stuff. Like you may have heard about the British Virgin Islands because that's where Epstein was based. That's the Epstein Island is there.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that. I just pulled it up. There was an entire Wikipedia article dedicated to taxation in the British Virgin Islands. Let me just read this to you. Among the items in the British Virgin Islands that are not subject to taxation are no capital gains tax. That means no tax on gains from stocks or investments and things like that. No gift tax, no sales tax, no value added tax, no profit tax, no inheritance tax or estate duty.
How does this government even run?
No, wait, I'm not even done yet. No wealth tax. And then there is technically still income tax assessed in the British Virgin Islands for companies and for individuals, but the rate of taxation has been set to 0.
So they say no money. They operate for free.
Yeah, they basically, they also get money from payroll deductions and then basically resort fees from everyone going to visit.
So it's all tourism. Wow.
Yeah. And so, when you hear about a company that's based in the British Virgin Islands, you might think, wow, this is a super convenient place to have my corporate headquarters because I have to get there on a prop plane. I heard
the
so
sailing is nice there. Just sail your boat out to headquarters.
I'm just saying it might be because of the tax laws there. But I'm just going to throw that out there. It might be because of the tax laws.
Maybe that has something to do with it. And also not a lot of regulation about a lot of that stuff.
Right. And also you should move there if you don't want to pay taxes. Although now, the crazy thing in the U.S. is they're talking about moving to 0 federal income tax and just funding the entire government from tariffs like they did in the early 1900s. And it's just, it's impossible to imagine the United States without federal income tax.
Look, I want to say that's a fascinating idea, but the market, the sort of economy has moved on from 1908 time. Ford wasn't even a thing there was no internet. There was no Bybit.
There was no internet
in 1908. I feel like things have changed a little bit since then. And I'm not sure that, an over a century old economic model is necessarily the one we should follow. But what do I know? I'm not an economist.
I think we're learning that there's a lot of keys that are held in the executive office to a lot of different parts of American culture and the economy.
Well, speaking of executive offices, Bernie, this is a very different executive office, but this is quite a big shakeup. Is reportedly Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, has said that she is planning to step down before the end of this year.
Okay.
And that's a big one.
It's huge. I say, okay, because I don't know about you. I don't know anything about this lady besides the fact that people who don't like Star Wars really don't like her.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know anything about her sort of like from a personal perspective. It's really just that if, I guess if you're the boss of something like this, right? Like it's a buck stops here thing. So when you have decide to do, say, a sequel trilogy of films to a franchise as beloved and behated as something like Star Wars.
Behated, by the way, is a great word. That's a great word.
It seems like you would go into that saying, let's plan this thing out well in advance. And I think it's pretty clear that that is not the situation that happened with the sequel trilogy. It seemed like it was constantly like changing direction and changing focus and changing what it wanted to do, what it wanted to accomplish as the series was being made. And I think a lot of that, because she was the boss, does fall, ultimately on her shoulders. The buck stops here, right?
Yeah.
So I do get that. I do get the criticism, and that with their TV strategy, they've had more misses than hits, that we've ended up with the Acolytes, the Book of Boba Fett's, the Obi-Wans. And, to be fair, it's not a great hit rate, but I will be grateful for the ones that we did get that we really like. There's like the Mandalorians and the Andors and the Skeleton Crews, and like those shows, I'm not sure we would have got without the strategy that she had in play. Regardless, I understand a lot of Star Wars fans don't like the way the franchise has been handled over the period that she's been in charge.
Yeah.
So I get it, but the vitriol seems very personal.
Vitriol is a good word, because I'm reminded of after Gene Roddenberry, basically the reins of the Star Trek franchise turned over from him to a guy named Rick Berman. Boy, those were like hardcore Trekkie fans. They were all just blasting Rick Berman for years and years and years. And then you look at the stuff that he ended up producing, like Star Trek Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Voyager. It's weird that over time, all his work has become beloved, So once again, the Star Trek franchise is kind of leading a little bit ahead of Star Wars. And you're seeing, I wonder, George Lucas, when he left, was not super popular either, after the prequels. But
right.
The prequels became beloved over time as well. It's just interesting to me how she has definitely caught a lot of heat, but there's been a lot of other people, big names like J.J. Abrams, associated with the sequel trilogy and everything else. And I feel like she's taken most of the architectural heat about this.
She has. And I'll be interested to see who ends up in that top spot, because, it could be someone from Star Wars, right? Like if you were to have, treat this as like a Lucasfilm's version of Feige, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it could be, Dave Filoni?
Yeah, Filoni or Favreau, or both of them, right?
Or both of them. But then it's also important to remember that Lucasfilm isn't just Star Wars, it's also Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's
so,
interesting.
would you have someone who's going to do both of those? Would you end up with like a Feige for sort of each of those different properties? How would you handle that? I'm not really sure, but it's a big development.
I nominate Troy Baker. When you say Indiana Jones, I immediately think of Troy Baker.
Look, Harrison Ford seemed to be a fan of his performance.
Oh, I think it was wildly well accepted, right?
It was very much so. But this is going to be a big shakeup. So I'm curious if anyone who's like more entrenched in the Star Wars faniverse has thoughts on like who might end up in that position. I'd love to hear it. It's not the only thing that's shaking up a little bit. Daredevil, Born Again. I'm going to try and keep this brief. I will talk about this for years if you let me. But Daredevil Born Again is coming out beginning of March. The trailer came out, was very well received, and they accomplished exactly what they wanted to with the very first trailer, which is, yes, bones will still be broken. We're not Disneyfying us. This is still going to be like the sort of hyper-violent show that you had and loved on Netflix. and this is what you want from Daredevil. They've screened the first 2 episodes for the press, and let me pull up the headline here. I think someone from Deadline says this is the best MCU pilot to date.
Wow.
Which
Okay.
I think
That's
is
very high praise.
High praise, right? Like there have been some good stuff. I want to say like WandaVision, just off the top of my head. That series developed in kind of a strange direction sometimes, but the pilot was impeccable.
It's funny because the moment you said that, I was like, wow, that's really high praise. Highest rated premiere for a Marvel series of all time. Then you started to name a Marvel series, and I immediately went, oh yeah, but there aren't really that many good Marvel series.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like Hawkeye was good, but I don't know that I'd set like that pilot episode as like super
Moon
strong.
Moon Knight was good, but it was also a very good premiere. But I wouldn't say like, I mean,
see, Agatha All Along was a good series,
right?
But I want to say that like that first episode set things up, but was not in itself going to blow you away.
If I was just going to name beloved Marvel series, I would say WandaVision, and then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, Loki's good. Loki's good.
Yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is also a weird one because I guess technically it's an MCU show, but that was a network show as well.
What do you mean? Why wouldn't it be an MCU show?
Well, no, it is an MCU show, but you know how Marvel for a while had this sort of scattershot approach where there was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. over here and there were the Netflix series over here, and then they didn't all work together. They didn't meld. They didn't all acknowledge each other or play into the sort of bigger MCU world for the most part. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was interesting because it starred Coulson.
Right.
But aside from like a few like minor side characters, I think that one of the characters from like Thor popped up a couple times, but it had very little crossover with the greater MCU in a lot of ways.
And was Agent Carter part of that as well, or was that a separate thing?
Agent Carter was yet another show.
Okay.
So that's why it was like scattershot approach, and that was one of the things with Daredevil, right? Is it was part of that Netflix slate that was like Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones and Daredevil and Punisher, and then they also had their sort of like group series of like the Defenders, and there was the whole concern when those shows all went away. Will we ever see any of these shows or characters again? And Daredevil was the first one to pop back up in the larger MCU as Matt Murdock in Spider-Man, and then as a sort of recurring character in She-Hulk.
Love interest. That's another series.
Love interest. They did it.
She-Hulk, not exactly beloved, but
I enjoyed it for what it was, but it's not like S tier by any means.
No, and then there's other ones like Secret Invasion where Marvel seemed to not want to show it to you while they're showing it to you. Like, can you just immediately forget we showed you this?
We want you to watch
while
this,
it's airing.
Yeah, and then just like forget all about it, please.
It was like, I've never seen a show like air with such immediate regret. It's such a weird thing. Why didn't they just can that one out of all the stuff that has been canned over the years?
It's like when someone shows you a project they're working on and they're like, well, it's not very good anyway.
Right.
They're like showing you for
we'll fix all this later. Like this will be a thing. Yeah. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, but this seems like it's a real return to form. So I guess they're going to screen the rest, like the full series for press later this week, and so we'll start to get official reviews. But either way, what I'm seeing is that this is great. The rework they did where they initially, I guess in the initial concepts, they killed Foggy and Karen off screen.
Don't know who that is.
They're sort of like the rest of his team.
Is that like Happy from Iron Man?
They're like they work with him in like the law firm anyway.
Oh, okay.
So they're like the characters that fill out the world, and Karen is also like the main connection with the Punisher. Anyway, they killed them off screen for the initial thing, and everyone was like, "God, what is this shit?" And so they reworked it, and they've gone back to, "We love you. This is MCU stuff."
It is just crazy to me. It's more highlights what an achievement it was to put that Marvel universe together when they only had just the chunk they had, because the Marvel universe is so compartmentalized. What you're talking about is like the Hell's Kitchen group, the Defenders with Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist and Jessica Jones. Then, of course, we all know about the X-Men universe side of it, which is really just every mutant title as well. But then Spider-Man was kind of like his own pocket universe as well. And Marvel only had like a quarter of it. And they managed to build this incredibly huge thing.
And they had sold off their major characters, right?
Yeah.
Like the X-Men and Spider-Man were the ones that people really knew about, right? I mean, I guess Hulk was like a character that a lot of people knew. But like when Iron Man was coming out, Iron Man was not a major character.
Did you know about the Avengers before the Iron Man movie?
I definitely heard of the Avengers before, but knew about it? No, not really.
Yeah, I felt like a lot of us who read comics were explaining to people what the Avengers were, which now in hindsight seems completely ridiculous. The Avengers are like, part of the world that we live in now.
Yeah, it's like if you say the Avengers to like anyone, I could probably say it to my grandma and she would know what it was.
She would be able to name probably all of them. Yeah, it's crazy. Well, the Daredevil series looks good. I'm very happy for them. And Ashley, I'm pleased to tell you that Marvel just announced they somehow just got hold of $1.5 billion to fund the Daredevil series. How'd they get that money? Where did that come from? Good for them.
They found it floating on a boat off the British Virgin Islands.
It's all in NFTs for some reason. But as soon as they liquidate those, they'll be good to go.
They're gonna be they're gonna be funding production in JPEGs. All right, well, before we go, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors for this episode of the show, Kelsey Gillum and Ryan H. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode of Morning Somewhere at patreon.com/Morning Somewhere.
All right, well, that does it for us today, February 25th, 2025. We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.